Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to start. I call to order the informal meeting of the plenary to observe the Nelson Mandela International Day. Members will recall that the Nelson Mandela International Day was designated in Resolution 64/13 of 10th November 2009. That's 2009. I would like to warmly welcome you all to this meeting. As mentioned in my letter dated 23rd May, 24th June and 15th July 2025, in accordance with Resolution 68/275 of 6th June 2014 and 69/269 of 2nd April 2015, the Assembly established the United Nations Nelson Mandela Prize as an honorary award to be presented once every 5 years as a tribute to recognize the outstanding achievements of 2 individuals, 1 female and 1 male, who have dedicated their lives to the service of humanity by promoting the purposes and principles of the United Nations while honoring and paying homage to Nelson Mandela's extraordinary legacy of reconciliation, political transition, and social transformation. Excellencies, distinguished laureates, ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate one of the towering figures of our time, Nelson Mandela. We honor his courage, his leadership in the struggle for freedom, and his lifelong commitment to unity across Africa. Madiba embodied the values of peace, equality, human rights, and service to others. He reminded us that freedom is meaningless without justice, that justice is the bedrock of peace, that peace depends on institutions that protect the rights and dignity of all people, and that these fundamental freedoms must never be compromised. In a world still divided by conflict and inequalities, Mandela's legacy urges us to still choose dialogue over hatred, understanding over fear and vengeance, and unity above all. Indeed, it is still in our hands to combat inequality and poverty, as this year's theme reminds us. This duty does not rest with any single leader or nation. It belongs to us all, belongs to all peoples, belongs to all nations. Dear friends, today's commemoration holds special significance, for we also host the award ceremony for the 2025 United Nations Nelson Mandela Prize. This is the 3rd edition of this prestigious award. It is conferred every 5 years to those who have dedicated their lives to the service of humanity and advancing the purposes and principles of the United Nations. It is my honor to welcome and congratulate this year's distinguished laureates. First, Ms. Brenda Reynolds of Canada is a social worker who brings a lifetime of lived experience, advocacy, and leadership to the forefront of indigenous peoples' health, mental wellness, and reconciliation efforts both in Canada and internationally. Second, Mr. Kennedy Odede of Kenya is an advocate of social entrepreneurship and community development. He is the founder and chief executive officer of Shining Hope for Communities, which empowers local communities and delivers vital services to over 2.4 million people each year. The selection of these remarkable leaders sends a powerful message that grassroots leadership places the power in our hands to create change, that each of us can make a difference. In this regard, I express my sincere appreciation to the selection committee comprised of the permanent representatives of Bahrain, Egypt, Finland, Poland, St. Kitts and Nevis, and South Africa as an ex officio member for their time, energy, and tireless engagement. I am also grateful to the eminent personalities who, in their advisory capacity, offered wisdom, invaluable advice, and insights that are pivotal in identifying laureates who reflect Mandela's spirit. Her Excellency Ms. Marcella Liebert, Governor General of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Her Excellency Ms. Tarja Halonen, former President of the Republic of Finland. His Excellency Dr. Mohamed Mustafa El Baradei, Nobel laureate, former Vice President of Egypt, and former Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and Ms. Elżbieta Mikos-Kuza, Senior Lecturer at the Faculty of Law, University of Warsaw, Poland. My sincere thanks also go to the Department of Global Communications and Under Secretary General Melissa Fleming for their extraordinary support. Excellencies, this year also marks the 10th anniversary of the Nelson Mandela Rules, the United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners, on which I convened a high-level debate last month. These rules are a testament to yet another aspect of Nelson Mandela's legacy, justice, and dignity for all everywhere. It is a legacy born from 27 years spent behind prison bars, where Mandela held firm to the belief that freedom, dignity, and equality were not just a dream for the few, but a destiny for all. Excellencies, this dream now rests in our hands. Nelson Mandela's life was a call to action, one that rings across generations today. As we mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, let us draw strength from his courage. Let us realize the promise of the United Nations Charter. Let us reaffirm faith in human rights, in the dignity and worth of human person, in equality between men and women. And let us establish conditions that ensure justice and respect for the obligations arising from the law. Our abiding aim must be to strengthen multilateralism so that tomorrow's leaders who will write its next chapters pick up a mantle of courage, compassion, and hope. What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived, as Madiba once said. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead. Let us forge ahead and make a difference. Thank you. Thank you. I now give the floor to His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations.
Mr. President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, Mandela Prize winners, Ms. Brenda Reynolds, Mr. Kennedy Odette, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we celebrate the life and legacy of Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. Madiba's extraordinary life was a triumph of the human spirit. He endured the brutal weight of oppression and emerged not with a vision of vengeance and division, but of reconciliation, peace, and unity. Today, Madiba's legacy is now our responsibility. We must carry forward this commitment to peace, justice, and human dignity. One of the central lessons of Mandela's life was that power is not a personal possession to be hoarded. Power is about lifting others up. It's about what we can achieve with one another and for one another. Power is about people. In every facet of his life, Nelson Mandela demonstrated the power of collective grassroots action to drive change and progress and deliver power to the powerless. This same spirit can be found in today's winners of the Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela Prize. Ms. Brenda Reynolds is a Saulteaux member from Fishing Lake First Nation in Canada. She's a social worker who turned the struggle against the most hideous of crimes against children into a national force for change, supporting and developing trauma responses for survivors and families of the residential school system. Mr. Kennedy Odede grew up in the Kibera slum in Kenya. A long-time community activist, the organization he founded unites community groups from across the country and now reaches more than 2.4 million people each year with essential services, everything from education to water. Both prize winners embody Nelson Mandela's words, which are engraved on their prizes, and I quote, "What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived, it is what difference we have made to the lives of others." End of quote. On behalf of the United Nations, I congratulate Ms. Reynolds and Mr. Odede on this well-deserved recognition. Excellences.
Your Excellencies, as the United Nations celebrates its 80th anniversary, Nelson Mandela's legacy of reconciliation and transformation continues to inspire and to drive us. Around the world, human rights and dignity are under threat, not only from conflict and instability, but from systematic inequalities, exclusion, climate disasters, and the rollback of hard-won freedoms. Now is the time to renew our global commitment to the principles that define our organization and indeed the extraordinary life of Nelson Mandela. Freedom, justice, equal rights, solidarity, reconciliation, peace. Today and every day, let's continue following the path and principles set by Nelson Mandela's life of service and progress. I thank you.
I thank the Secretary General. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Grace Naledi Mandisa Pandor, Chair of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, to deliver a keynote statement.
Your Excellency, President of the General Assembly, Excellency Secretary General, permanent representatives, invited guests. I wish to begin by thanking you all for being here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to address you all this morning. The Nelson Mandela Foundation expresses profound thanks to this body for allowing us this unique opportunity to address you on Nelson Mandela International Day. President Mandela had an enduring appreciation for the bold role the United Nations played in advancing South Africa's liberation struggle. The UN steered us to freedom, stood against apartheid domination, not through arms, but through bringing its undeniable moral weight into combat against injustice. That boldness, that courage is needed more and more today. And we hope as we remember and honor President Mandela, we recall his words, "It is in your hands." So what do we as the foundation call on all of us to do today? On this day, Nelson Mandela International Day, our call to all of you is to remember to make good trouble. This call is inspired by the man himself. While we all refer to President Mandela by his first name, his given first name, Nelson, the name that he was actually given at birth was Rolihlahla in isiXhosa, which was Mandela's mother tongue, and which is one of the main languages of our country, South Africa. The colloquial meaning of Rolihlahla is troublemaker. In true isiXhosa, it is shake the tree. Mandela was a troublemaker, the kind of good troublemaker that we need more of in the world today, and the kind that we will continue to need well into the future. The kind of troublemaker that some people did not always love because he pushed for an equality that we all should enjoy and for the overcoming of a system of oppression which was convenient and profitable to some. A system of oppression that was defeated in South Africa eventually, but which has yet to be eradicated globally. The foundation, which I now chair, often gets asked what Mandela would say or do on certain issues if he were alive today. We often ask this question of ourselves. In the context of my call here today, the question does arise: what kind of world would he be prepared to make good trouble for? Drawing on his life and work and his many personal reflections, we believe that it would be a just world, a world where justice does not kneel to the rich and powerful, where our collective upliftment takes precedence over individual privilege, where the benefits and burdens of our society are equally shared, where our privilege and personal biases do not sway us from being just, and where our like or dislike of someone does not hinder us from doing what is right in relation to them. President Mandela was a fierce man on matters of justice, but I don't recall one occasion where he was disrespectful or rude to another person. So this world where justice is respected and upheld is the kind of world that we are asking you to make good trouble for. Now, some may ask, as you sit here, that I'm an accountant, I am just a teacher, I am just a manager. What does making good trouble look like for me? While it can take on individual manifestations, let me suggest how we can bring it to life and give expression to it in our everyday lives. Firstly, making good trouble means being really excellent at what you do. You should have the knowledge that doing very well on your responsibilities contributes toward collective upliftment, regardless of whether people are watching or not, and regardless of the magnitude of the action. What we refer to sometimes as the ordinary has its own significance, and when done to the best of one's ability, this can make a positive impact on the lives of others and contribute toward better processes, systems, and institutional functioning. Second, making good trouble means always asking oneself the question as you go through life, how do I make change in the space that I'm in? Because it's incredible that we can be in significant spaces and achieve absolutely nothing. So how do I use my space to make a difference? And showing up to what that question reveals. These are the things that Nelson Mandela did. He aimed to be excellent in the things that he did, and he showed up to the question of how he could make change in the space that he was in with his whole self and not just a part of himself. The two awardees of this year's United Nations Nelson Mandela Prize, Brenda Reynolds and Kennedy Odede, offer us further examples of people who are energetic in their pursuit of good trouble. Last night, we launched a really important exhibition for us right here at the UN. The exhibition is entitled Our Shared Humanity in Action. It focuses on the important role that the UN Special Committee Against Apartheid played in combating apartheid in South Africa. The committee was established by your body, the UN General Assembly, in 1962, and its work over the decades of its existence demonstrates what can be done when people come together to make good trouble for global equity. The committee demonstrated what can be done when diplomats come together, rise to the occasion, and dedicate themselves to the upliftment of people in need, out of the recognition that while they may not be their fellow national citizens, they are their fellow human beings. What brought freedom to South Africa was good trouble. And while making good trouble for global equity requires many things at this current juncture in our geopolitical domain, one of the things that is needed now is for us to contribute to building a stronger, reformed, and capable United Nations. As the foundation, we believe the UN must remain the premier multilateral body of our globe, and that we should support it to execute its very significant mandate. We need to democratize its structures. We need to have it more efficient. We need the Security Council to do the job it was established for, but we must maintain the UN. This must happen for the sake of the global community, and we must have change for the credibility of this organization. So as we celebrate 80 years of the UN, let us think about and build better for the next 80 years. When President Mandela came to the United Nations for the first time, he said that while the UN was in session, people would come up to him and shake hands with him, and that he could not bring himself, due to his good manners, to shake hands with people while seated. So he would instinctively get up as ambassadors approached him and shake hands with them. This, however, was not to the liking of his delegation, who told him, "Mr. President, you are disturbing the conference." And they asked him to leave and go back to his hotel, which, being Mandela, he did. I'm also reminded of the kind of heaviness with which he first came to the UN, given the challenges of South Africa's transition to democracy and the legacy he inherited. One can imagine, as he was negotiating, the weight on his shoulders as he spoke to colleagues in this chamber, but also the kind of reprieve he might have felt in the presence of so many country representatives committed to international solidarity and to support for a free South Africa. So let us too feel a reprieve in the company of all of us gathered here today. But let us leave here reminded of the work that each of us is called to contribute to. I trust that the memory of Nelson Mandela will keep inspiring all of us to do the work of transformation and to never give up on his dream of a just society and a just world. I will end my contribution this morning in the same way that President Mandela concluded his speech in 1990 when he addressed that special committee against apartheid in this very room. He said, "We also take this opportunity to extend warm greetings to all others who fight for their liberation and for their human rights, including the peoples of Palestine and Western Sahara. We commend their struggles to you, convinced that we are all moved by the fact that freedom is indivisible, convinced that the denial of the rights of one diminishes the freedom of others. I thank you once again for allowing me the opportunity to address you, particularly you, Mr. President and Secretary General. I wish all of you leave this room determined to make good trouble. Thank you very much.
I thank the chair of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. We will now proceed to the Nelson Mandela Prize Award ceremony for our two laureates. It is my honor to present Mrs. Brenda Reynolds, Indigenous social worker from Canada. Ms. Reynolds is supported today by a proud community of Indigenous women and girls, men and boys. We warmly welcome to the General Assembly's Hall today the daughters of tradition and the sons of tradition visiting from the state of Wisconsin in the United States. Their presence here underscores the vital importance of preserving indigenous cultures and traditions with our global community. It also serves as a reminder that the work we honor in our laureates today has a profound impact on the lives of indigenous people. I invite Mrs. Brenda Reynolds to the stage to receive the 2025 United Nations Nelson Mandela Prize presented by the Secretary General of the United Nations. We will now hear a statement by Mrs. Brenda Reynolds, the 2025 United Nations Nelson Mandela Prize laureate. Mrs. Reynolds, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Excellency and Mr. Secretary General, honored members of the United Nations, esteemed delegates, including the daughters of tradition and sons of tradition, thank you for joining us today. And my family members who have traveled here with me, and friends, and others who are watching at home and in their workplaces. Miigwech. I wish to respectfully acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional homeland of the Lenape people. Sorry if I mispronounced that. When I first found out that I was one of the 2 laureates for this year's Nelson Mandela Awards, I was speechless, and even though I speak 2 languages, I still cannot find the words to express the depth of my gratitude and the humility I have to accept the United Nations Nelson Mandela Prize. And happy birthday to him in the heavens today, because now he is one of our ancestors. To receive a prize that holds the name of an iconic man who embodied peaceful resistance and reconciliation is a tremendous honor and a solemn responsibility. I am moved by the recognition by the United Nations, which continues to uphold the ideals of justice, peace, and human dignity. I am a Saulteaux woman from Fishing Lake First Nation, a reserve in Canada, who shared similar parallels to Nelson Mandela's experiences with our government's efforts to civilize and change who we are as Indigenous people to our homelands. And there are many parallels to what we had experienced in both our countries, where the governments impacted policies to change who we are, to face oppression, to face a violation of human rights in our countries. And it is from that perspective that I have been following and have had an interest in Nelson Mandela since I found out about him. One outstanding example, is when the South African government came to Canada during the 1930s to ask the Canadian government, how do you manage your Indigenous people? Their response was, we have them segregated on reserves, where they have to have a pass when they leave the reserves. We also give them status cards to identify who they are. That practice, some of those practices became the model that is known as apartheid in South Africa. A government practice here in Canada, not here, but in Canada, started by the forced removal of Indigenous children in the 1800s. The children were separated from their families, from their communities, and from their cultures, and placed in residential schools for the purpose of civilizing them, and also to eradicate their cultures. While attending the residential schools, the children experienced severe abuse. And one of the things that they were not permitted to do was to speak their language. But some of the abuse included the emotional abuse, where they were made to feel ashamed of who they are as Indigenous people. And I was not a residential school student, but my experience started when I became a counselor at Gordon's Indian Residential School in 1988. At that time in Saskatchewan, Gordon's was the only federally operated residential school. And while I was there, just before the end of the school year, one 13-year-old girl came to me and said she wanted to share with me her experiences of what was happening in the residential school. She was being sexually abused by a senior staff member. At the end of the night, we had 17 girls disclose that they were being sexually abused by the same staff member. And subsequently, I started hearing from other students about their experiences. And some of them were former students at that time, but they had also were talking about their own experiences of sexual abuse. And the person that senior staff member, he was charged and convicted, and he became the first person of a residential school to be convicted. So these charges were the beginning of other disclosures that came from across Canada from survivors who were speaking about their sexual abuse experiences. Those charges and disclosures became the largest class action lawsuit to date in Canada. And that lawsuit is known as the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement. Under the settlement agreement was a provision to provide emotional support, for Canada to provide emotional support. And I was asked to develop a pilot called the Resolution Health Support Program. And I developed the program that included training Indigenous people from communities and cultural support workers to provide emotional support to survivors, their families, and once the Truth and Reconciliation started in Canada, we provided support to Canadians attending the hearings that we had across Canada. And what I did for 7 years, when I trained the workers on a monthly basis, I trained them to understand what the long-lasting effects of childhood trauma and what those impacts are on their survivors and also intergenerationally. But we have to remember that trauma experienced in genocide is not the trauma that is defined in the Western sense. In the Western sense, trauma is an experience where it's a short, brief experience, and then you return to a normal state. But when you're experiencing genocide, you learn to live with the trauma, and that has severe impacts on you. And so these experiences of abuse and the attempt to eradicate the culture, and were some of the experiences that we started to hear in the beginning of the settlement agreement. And we also heard of students going through medical experimentation, and we still continue to hear of cases of forced and coerced of trauma. They stay in that elevated state of response, and that becomes normal because you're with a perpetrator and you're living in a system where you are facing racism and discrimination. And secondly, what I did with the trainer when I was training the workers was that for them to understand the settlement agreement and what the provisions were and what options were for the survivors that they can go through under the settlement agreement. And I did this at a grade 3 education level because this is what the survivors were saying, is that I went to school for 8 years, but I came out with a grade 3 education. So for them to understand what was available to them, I ensured that the information we provided was at a grade 3 level that they can understand. Furthermore, what I did is I also included Indigenous culture as a part of the healing, the education, and the emotional support. The eradication of the culture was to not be comfortable with who you are as an Indigenous person, and that our ways were heathen ways. And so, but I know from my own experience that culture is own healing. And I was fortunate to grow up with my cultural ceremonies and practices in my own language. And in Canada, and as we worked with people, is that there are healing practices in words where we can understand what trauma is and how it impacts us and what those symptoms are. And so it was important to me to have that included as the healing process. And so we provided emotional support to survivors as they proceeded through the hearings serious harms. We had one category within the settlement agreement where serious harms were done in private hearings. And now we had over 36,000 people that went through those hearings in serious harms. And what Canada has done is destroyed the evidence from those hearings so that they cannot be opened and shared. So that's one of the unfortunate things that has happened. And when they have private hearings for triggering
would like to highlight three key. First, the continued relevance of the call to action that first we honor Nelson from prisoner of conscience to president, the ideals enshrined in the of justice, dignity, and reconciliation. As GRULAC, we stand in solidarity with the people of South Africa and all nations working to uphold the values President Mandela championed. His legacy is not limited by geography or by language. It speaks to the aspirations of people across our own region and around the world for inclusive development, non-discrimination, and equal opportunity. Second, Mr. President, we reaffirm the principles that President Mandela stood for, especially National Day, and the creation of this prize reflect the United Nations recognition of his extraordinary contribution to humanity. Value have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead, unquote. Let us remember the spirit of service. Let us channel it into acts of kindness, advocacy, and solidarity, and into tangible efforts that improve the lives of people and uphold their dignity. Above all, we must recognize that the scale of today's challenges demands a response far greater than past achievements required. The spirit of Mandela calls us not to replicate past success, but to rise far above them to meet the urgency of now with the courage of transformative action. Mr. President, in closing, GRULAC reaffirms its strong commitment to the values of peace, human dignity, and solidarity. We are committed to carrying forward the spirit of President Mandela in our multilateral engagement, and we stand ready to work constructively with all member states to advance our shared goals of peace, progress, and dignity for all. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Barbados. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Norway, who will speak on behalf of the Western European and other states.
Mr. President, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the members of the Western European and other states group as we come together to mark Nelson Mandela International Day 2025. I would like to congratulate the two laureates of the 2025 United Nations Nelson Mandela Prize, Ms. Brenda Reynolds of Canada and Mr. Kennedy Odede of Kenya. Two individuals whose inspiring and impressive work within their communities and beyond are the epitome of what Nelson Mandela stood for. We should all strive to take a page from their books and work towards a better world. Since the General Assembly first established this commemoration in 2009, every 18th of July has stood as a powerful reminder of the enduring legacy of Nelson Mandela, a legacy rooted in the pursuit of freedom, equality, and dignity for all. His legacy is also one of determination and reconciliation, which is more important than ever as we call for peace to prevail. As we face a world marked by overlapping crises and erosion of trust in global institutions, Mandela's example offers direction. His unparalleled courage in confronting injustice and his unwavering faith in the potential of humanity must continue to inspire and guide us. In 2005, with great foresight of our world today, Mandela delivered a clear and urgent appeal, and I quote, "Do not look the other way. Do not hesitate. Recognize that the world is hungry for action, not words. Act with courage and vision." End of quote. This year's theme, "It is still in our hands to combat poverty and inequality," calls us to collective action. It reminds us that the tools for change already exist and that Mandela's legacy does not belong to the history books. It lives in the choices we make and the courage we summon today to stand up against injustice. The challenges before us are stark. As of the latest estimates, 700 million people remain trapped in extreme poverty. Inequities persist, often deepening in the very places where peace remains fragile. And yet, there is progress and potential. In communities everywhere, people are acting boldly and creatively to build more equitable societies. Mr. President, let us focus our efforts on peace, human rights, sustainability, gender equality, education, and meaningful inclusion, not as ideals, but as non-negotiable building blocks for a fairer world. We are entrusted with an opportunity to rebuild trust, deepen cooperation, and renew the global commitment to leaving no one behind. Mandela's life teaches us that even in the face of impossible odds, transformation is possible if we act with unity, humility, and vision. Mr. President and dear colleagues, let us honor that call. Let us embody his legacy, not only with speeches, but with moral courage to act together and now. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Norway. I would like to inform the Assembly that I have received requests from additional member states to speak in this commemorative meeting. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Africa.
President of the General Assembly, Mr. Philemon Yang, Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Chairperson of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Dr. Naledi Pandor, honored recipients of the Nelson Mandela Prize, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, today is both an honor and a privilege to deliver the statement on behalf of South Africa as we commemorate International Nelson Mandela Day, a day intended not only to honor Nelson Mandela, but also to encourage and guide our own growth and transformation. Every year, we take a moment to reflect on the life and legacy of a man whose moral courage and unwavering commitment to justice reshaped a nation and inspired a global movement. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was and remains a towering symbol of humanity, humility, and hope. Whilst we may appear to be commemorating his memory, we are, in truth, recalling his values of integrity, compassion, forgiveness, and above all, the relentless pursuit of equality and dignity for all. Madiba taught us that the leadership is expressed through purpose and not power, and that to lead is an act of service to people, not one of domination and being served by people. In these uncertain and divided times, we should hold true the strength of unity and reconciliation. Indeed, Mandela once commented, "In the end, what will unite us most strongly and provide the surest foundation for our new nation is joint action to build a future for all our people, regardless of our political affiliation." While speaking about South Africa, the sentiment is easily expanded to humanity and the power of unity. We are currently faced with immense challenges that are at times seem difficult to overcome, possibly even overwhelming. Yet we have history to remind us that through unity, humanity has beaten the odds before. We need to reaffirm our commitment to respectful and equitable relations and partnerships among nations. We should continue to build institutions that equitably serve nations and the people they represent. And we should remain true to the decisions we have made and honor commitments therein. Mr. President, International Nelson Mandela Day is not just about honoring his legacy. It serves as an annual reminder that our journey is not complete and our individual contributions to collective action matter. We must become the agents of change we wish to see. We should stand against inequality and injustice. And as we mark this day, let us renew our shared commitment to the ideals personified by Madiba. Let us retain his enduring faith in the goodness of people. We should mark this day not only by words, but by acts that honor his legacy. It is the legacy that is marked by a movement for true equality and a better world. I wish to close by recalling Nelson Mandela's guiding words to us as leaders. We need the commitment of leaders at all levels in order to achieve the better life of all that we promised to our people. As we rise to meet the challenges of our time, we must lead with courage, serve with humility, and walk forward with hope. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of South Africa. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Señor Presidente,
Mr. President, Excellencies, we align ourselves with Barbados' statement on behalf of GRULAC. It's a real honor for Cuba to participate in this meeting to commemorate International Nelson Mandela Day, a day for us to reflect on the values of peace, dignity, social justice, and solidarity, the values that embodied this exceptional man. For the Cuban people, Madiba is not only a universal symbol, he is also a brother in arms whose story is intimately linked to ours. We're united by a relationship that was forged in the toughest days of the fight against apartheid, when the solidarity between our peoples became a common front. As was stated by the General of the Army, Raul Castro, Africa's cause has always been Cuba's cause. It was this solidarity that Madiba recognized and was grateful for. In his visit to Havana in 1991, he said, "We will never forget that the Cuban people were the only ones that fought and won for us." This quote summarizes the profound respect between two peoples and between two great men, Fidel and Mandela. President Nelson Mandela and Fidel Castro shared not only a sincere friendship, but also a common vision of human beings, of justice, under the premise that no power or hegemonic interest should be placed above the dignity of mankind. Both defended the solidarity and unity of the South as a way to achieving a more just international order. Both knew that freedom is not authentic if it doesn't deliver real rights for the poorest people. Today, when new forms of exclusion, neocolonialism, xenophobia, and racism are threatening humanity, the example of Mandela is more necessary than ever. Cuba continues its commitment to this legacy. Although still facing huge challenges, nobody can stop our medical cooperation in Africa, our contribution to the training of thousands of young Africans, and our solidarity to Africa, which is unwavering. Nelson Mandela lives in every single act of justice, in every battle against inequality, in every gesture of solidarity between peoples. As stated by the brother, President Miguel Diaz-Canel of Cuba, Mandela represents the best of the human soul, the value of resistance, the power of forgiveness without renouncing one's principles. Today, we reaffirm our commitment to the ideals of Madiba, and we do this convinced that his example will continue to guide peoples who are fighting for a more just and inclusive world. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Cuba. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Burundi.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, on this International Day, Nelson Mandela International Day, Burundi associates itself with the international community and also pays tribute to this exceptional man, a man of unshakable commitment to justice, freedom, peace, who left an indelible trace in the history of humankind. Nelson Mandela was not just a leader of a people. He remains a symbol of resistance to oppression and shows us what humanity can do when it frees itself from hatred, vengeance, and division. Throughout his life, Madiba incarnated the values of courage, dignity, dialogue, and forgiveness. He led South Africa towards democracy and reconciliation without ever giving in to the appeal of vengeance. As he said himself, to be free, it does not just mean getting rid of one's chains. It means living in a way which respects and strengthens the freedom of others. Mr. President, the people of Burundi have a very emotional memory of the historic role played by Nelson Mandela in the peace process in Burundi. In 1979, in 89, we picked up the conciliation flame of President Nyerere, and Nelson Mandela spared no effort so as to bring people together, bring together hearts and minds. Through his moral standing, his natural authority, and his deep humanity, he gained the trust of the Burundian parties and made sure that wisdom reigned. And this led to reconciliation and opened the pathway towards peace. His personal commitment has led to the signature of the Arusha Peace and Reconciliation Agreement in Burundi on the 28th of August 2000. And this was a turning point, which still today is a foundation of stability and national reconciliation and democracy in my country. In this, for us, he will forever remain an architect of peace, and he showed us that lasting peace is not built through domination or through exclusion, but rather through compromise, mutual respect, and justice. Mr. President, the heritage of Nelson Mandela is not limited to South Africa or the African continent even. It belongs to the global, universal heritage. His fight against apartheid, racism, inequality, but also for education, human rights, solidarity amongst peoples. These struggles remain very relevant in a world today facing many challenges. And this is a message that's intergenerational and recalls for us that education is the most powerful tool we can use so as to change the world. And it is by following this path that Burundi has committed itself to build a democratic society, a more equitable more equitable one, and more resilient one, following our vision of an emerging country. Please allow me to, Mr. President, on this solemn day, to congratulate the prize winners of the Mandela Prize, congratulate them of their dedication to the service of humanity. For Burundi, paying tribute to Mandela is not just through words, but also through actions, by identifying and praising those who help move us towards reconciliation, social justice, and human dignity. It's also a way of perpetuating his legacy and continuing his work, serving his ideals and acting so as to help build the rule of law, fundamental rights, social cohesion, protecting the most vulnerable, and work towards a better world. As was recalled by Nelson Mandela, with humility, he said, "I'm not a saint unless you consider that every saint is a sinner who continues trying." On this symbolic day, we reiterate our commitment to equitable multilateralism, which is to bring justice and which help us remember the struggle for freedom. Let his legacy continue inspiring present and future generations and help us on our collective path toward the world of peace, tolerance, and shared humanity. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Burundi. We have heard the last speaker for this meeting. Before concluding, and as announced in the President's letter dated 10th July, I would like to invite members to participate in the traditional Nelson Mandela International Day public service activity, which will take place today from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. at Governor's Island in the New York Harbor. The informal meeting of the plenary on the observance of the annual Nelson Mandela International Day is now concluded. Members are reminded that the 85th plenary meeting of the Assembly will be held immediately following the adjournment of this meeting. The meeting is adjourned.
you.